What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Aspect Podcast Network, the home of the Valyrian Voice. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below to be the first to listen to our weekly reactions and other shows from the Aspect, including X-Men, Star Wars, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and more. What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Valyrian Voice here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Batts, and joining me every week to discuss the latest and greatest in the world of Westeros is Hamed Alazzamy. Hamed, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited to be back. I know we weren't on last week, but I'm happy to get into it this week.
Very nice, very nice.
All right. Well, let's kick off this week's episode by just diving into our overall thoughts and reactions. Alex, what did you think of episode 4?
I really liked it. So briefly to talk about it, since we didn't last week, I thought episode 3 was okay. It still was really good by comparison of most TV that happens out there, but I thought the pacing was a little bit weird in it and was just kind of like overall meh on it. And I think that for part of this episode, I still kind of had that feeling. Like the pacing I thought was sort of interesting in a couple of different spots. But overall, I really liked it. I think I mean, everyone's going to be talking about the last like 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, you know,
The actual
big
battle.
battle. Yeah, and everything
Yeah.
that happens there. Um, but yeah, no, I think that this episode did more of kind of what we were talking about in our first episodes of how this show is getting more into the like switching back and forth and moving from location to location and sets of people to different sets of people. They're doing that a lot, and then yeah, I really liked how things were layered and ended up coming together for the final battle. I also really love like which we'll get into it with our like favorite moments and stuff, but um they embraced the magic a lot more, which I thought was really nice to see, and I liked that. So that, and then of course, this being the like first instance of dragon fighting dragon in this
hmm
war is
hmm
a pretty major thing, which I'm sure we'll dive into. But what did you think of this episode overall?
Okay. Well, to backtrack, I kind of agree with what you're saying about last week's episode. I kind of thought it was a little bit weird. Like, I know that there was going to be some sort of build-up episode to the first battle and stuff, but at the same time, I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit strange. I thought the idea of Rhaenyra literally sneaking back into King's Landing and then going to the sept or the temple, the church, whatever you want to call it, in the light of the seven, or like the religion of the seven, to talk with Alicent, as if like somehow this can all be avoided. I just thought it was a strange choice overall, and I probably haven't gotten that far into the book. I'm not sure if this is something that also happens in the source material itself, but
It does not.
it doesn't,
From
right?
what yeah, no, it doesn't.
I
Actually,
just felt
I
like
just
that
read
was
through.
such a strange decision. Like, well, what was she really waiting on? Like, was she waiting on Allison to like just say, "Yeah, you're right. You know what? All the men surrounding us are definitely trying to manipulate us into war. You know what? Let's just go ahead and call off the whole thing."
I
You know, I
thought that like that scene and that specific story beat, the way that they handled it in episode 3 was not great. It was just kind of clunky. I do like where that um, gets us with Alicent in this episode, because I did really like the moment whenever she's talking about, you know, with when she's talking with Laris and she says that like Aegon supporters will believe what they will and Rhaenyra's will believe what they will, and like Viserys's intent died with him, and I like that, and like her saying that, one, I think is really cool, good, but then it also gets into the larger optics, I guess, of this whole war, and that, yeah, like it doesn't matter why it started, which was also a theme of
exactly.
the last episode between like the Brackens and the Blackwoods,
And
and
the
like how
Blackwoods.
They can't even they don't know why they're fighting, but they're fighting because violence
Exactly.
begets
Exactly.
violence, and, like, they mentioned that a lot last episode too, and so, like, I
Was
like it showing that,
was
um
the speech between Rhaenys and Rhaenyra, was that this episode or last episode? The one where she talks about, you know, it doesn't really matter how the war started, or it doesn't really matter
Oh, yeah,
where.
that was last week. It
That
yeah, it was
was last week,
Rhaenys
right?
essentially
Yeah.
saying, like, the same thing that Alicent comes to realize herself here, where it's like, it doesn't matter, like, I do like too that she and this is a cool thing with history, and part of what makes Fire and Blood such a cool book is that, yeah, she's like, or did this dance, like, start, whenever, like, long before Viserys's reign, or, like, in the beginning of it or whatever, and, like, just how you can say, "Oh, well, it started here," but really the things that happened there are so intertwined and impacted by the things that
She
came right
made a
before, and,
great
like,
point. She made a great point when
yeah,
she was
like,
talking about how this war could have essentially started when Luke took out Aemon's eye, when they were children.
yeah, yeah.
That's something.
So it's just like depending on where you wanna, like, draw that line or point to it,
Exactly, exactly. That's the complexity of war. But as for this week, yeah, no, I liked the episode this week. Definitely more than last week because obviously, dragon versus dragon, that's definitely something you can always look forward to. But also at the same time, you know, things are I think this episode, the character development that we've been seeing the first three episodes is really starting to show itself maybe a little bit this episode. We've seen Aegon, we've seen how irresponsible he is, but we also saw him talk to his mother for what seems like the first time this season. And while it wasn't a great conversation, but we saw him, we saw more of that dynamic. Because we saw before that Aegon says that his mother hates him, but she hates him in private. And we saw glimpses of that, but we never really saw that, come to light until they were talking about, this week, his idea of this week. And when she was telling him, like, you don't put on, you don't automatically gain wisdom when you put on the crown.
such a good line. Do you
It
think
was
that
it
it's
was
just
it was
it's just, like,
so
wearing
good.
it imbues you with wisdom? I was like, "Oh."
Loved that so much. I really, really did. But yeah, no, I definitely loved the episode this week. Not only because of the obvious, but the other stuff, the other aspects of it as well.
Yeah, I liked the stuff with, Jace and Bela, like, they're seeing their relationship blossom more, and, like, how they interact, and then, yeah, the entire council, how it's, was dealing with Rhaenyra's absence to go to King's Landing to treat with Alicent, which
Hmm.
was a choice. Um, yeah, I think that, like you just said, all the characters very much are living in kind of the roles that they have established now, and, like,
Hmm.
their, patterns of action, and you just get a lot more of that from each of them. Um, but yeah, it's some good stuff. We will be diving deeper into that though, so we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to be diving more into some of our favorite moments from the episode. We'll be right back. Hey, Aspect listener, my name is Alex.
And I'm Kate, enjoying this show on the Aspect Network.
Then check out Bending the Narrative.
We are your one stop shop for everything in the world of Avatar The Last Airbender.
Each week, we go back and discuss your favorite episodes of the series with a particular focus on the characters and narrative threads that tie the series together.
In addition to discussing the original series, we also dive into other stories in the world of Avatar, like Legend of Korra, the live action Netflix series, the books, the comics, and more.
Join us as we travel the globe with Team Avatar and discuss one of the greatest animated series of all time on Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Valyrian Voice. Before the break, we discussed our overall thoughts on Season 2, Episode 4, but now we want to dive a little bit deeper into some of our favorite moments from the episode. Hamed, what were some of your highlights from this week?
Okay, well, this
You're gonna take the obvious
character.
one? Oh,
I mean,
okay.
yeah, obviously from the obvious, the big, dragon fight and all that stuff. But I did want to point out, as much as I hate him, I really thought Kristen Cole was really good this episode.
He's got my favorite scene probably, actually, which is
E-
such a bummer.
Was it the beheading?
No, actually, which that was really good too.
It
He
was.
did
It was
whenever he's like,
the
"You should be thanking me." I was like, "Damn, bro, why was that actually like the best comeback you possibly
So
could have had?"
you're essentially talking about near the end of the episode where he's like, literally just
Yeah,
dragging himself through the battlefield, and
yeah.
then
Oh,
he's
that was
like
so good.
telling this pile of ash, he's like, the king has fallen. We should look for him. That was so well done. I love that so much.
Uh, yeah, the whole sequence was amazing.
That was good. Other than Kristen Cole, I really I liked Alice in this episode. That's not something that happens often for me, but she had some good lines this episode, and I really really enjoyed them. You mentioned this in the first segment, and I like the fact that we're really starting to touch into the magical slash supernatural side of the
Hmm.
show. Pretty much Damon's. I'm calling it a big side quest essentially.
That's what
Um,
everyone's, and it basically it also feels like it just straight up feels like a Souls level.
it
Like
does. Just
Damon's
seeing
just having
seeing
visions in Harrenhal.
exactly. Oh my God. I just it's something that I never really expected, and
Hmm.
I could not think of a more perfect person to go through these trials and tribulations more than Damon himself, because I feel like Damon is so well grounded into reality. Like he feels like, I just feel like he's the kind of person that like doesn't have like extremely broad horizons, mentally. He hasn't had his eyes opened up, because of he's so self-focused, and so just very much looking after himself and only himself. And with that comes
Yeah.
a certain level of selfishness and just a lack of not seeing anyone else's viewpoint. So just having all of these ghosts or whatever you want to call them show up in front of him and tell him different viewpoints. I just thought it was really really good, honestly.
Yeah, I think that them embracing the magic more is, I agree with you, something I really did not expect to see happen, and I think that it's really cool because I think that because of the show and how much like Game of Thrones proper and how much they strayed away from any of the, like, it had dragons, but there weren't people going around like using magic really. Like there was a couple of the red priestesses, but like they didn't do a ton. And so I think that generally people will kind of forget that it's a fantasy setting. Like it has
Hmm.
dragons obviously, but it doesn't have, for the most part, in like when we see the shows, the more fantastical elements to it. And so I do definitely like that they are seeming to be embracing that more with this. And yeah, using it with Damon, I think is perfect. It really fits and adds to where he's at in the story and what he's going through, like in this time period. Because, like,
Right.
I mean, without having the visions and stuff, he's still like he's in the place that he's supposed to be during this. Like he takes Harrenhal and stays there for a little bit. Um, and so I think this is a really smart way to add some depth to that. And also, I mean, yeah, it's just cool to see. And seeing Millie Alcock with the wearing
The
her
severed
father's crown,
head. Oh yeah, yeah. The
that
the
too.
thought
But
that was something else.
yeah, I mean,
Both
just think
things essentially.
getting to see her on the throne and wearing the crown, and then yeah, Damon's reaction. It was just very good stuff. I was very excited to see that. Um, Yeah, I want to touch on it before I forget. And you mentioned it, and I brought it up. But my favorite scene, yeah, was with Kristen Cole. I love, which I'm sure we'll talk about the dragon stuff in a minute. But I love the way that this episode dealt with how cataclysmic something like that is, and especially for everyone around them fighting.
Hmm.
And they talk about it in like the behind the scenes thing, but where it's as soon as dragons get involved, which the show also has been very much like beating the audience over the head with it, sort of, that like all of the characters are saying multiple times, like we have to do everything we can to avoid dragons fighting dragons because once that happens, it's not good to say the least. And I really like how this episode treated that, and I think that the sequence with Cole is uh, just perfect way of showcasing that and seeing the complete just carnage and destruction and like how much no one on that battlefield matters in comparison to the dragons. Like once
Exactly.
they start throwing down, like it's done so well. It looks so hauntingly beautiful, and yeah, like you said, him literally like talking to the dude, and it's just a pile of dust that has been incinerated. Like it's wild to see. So yeah, I really loved that scene, and I think that I'm blanking on the actor's name, um, but he did a fantastic job in
Honestly,
that.
the name escapes me as well because
Fabian, right? I
I
I wanna
think,
say
yeah, I remember reading it
Fabian
this week because
Frankel
he
or
had to turn off
something
his
like that?
comments last week. Like the actual
Yeah,
actor himself, he had to turn off his comments on
which is
Instagram
so
last week.
so terrible.
Ah, that is
Um,
just I never understood that. Like,
just be like a
if you're
normal person, guys. He's a
exactly.
actor.
How
Yeah,
can how
it's
can
not
we
the
not
character.
differentiate between a character and an actual person? How have we
Yeah,
reached this point in society? You know what I mean? It's just it's crazy to think
um,
about. But getting back to it,
yeah,
no, he was great this week. He really was. And I thought something that I'm really enjoying this season that I did not really expect to see, the chemistry between Eamon and Kristen Cole is
it's
so
really good.
so good.
It's real good, yeah. I also okay, did you remember what was going to be happening in this episode before we got there? Because I know you've listened through the book once, but I know you haven't gotten to like
No,
where we're
I
at
haven't got.
in rereading.
I remember stating that the last thing that I actually read was Blood and Cheese. You don't just stop right
Okay,
there. And
so
by the
having
way, I know what you want to talk about. I know you because I know that there's something in this episode that strays heavily from the book. Um,
I don't know how. See, and that's what I think it definitely leaves that possibility open. But
I
I
don't.
was curious, like in general, how the like Kristen Cole going to attack, like why he's going to Rook's Rest, and it's the Lorada Dragons because Aemon and Vhagar are waiting to then attack. Um, and then Aegon flying out also, and everything that ensues from that. I am curious how that plays for an audience that doesn't know like what's about to go down in full. Because like I literally a few days ago finished rereading like
Right.
through this part of the book and was like, okay, well I know X, Y, and Z is going to happen, but I'm really curious just how like impactful or like how that played as everything was unfolding.
I when I was watching, I don't know. I didn't feel like, as someone who's just a straight show watcher in this instance, since I didn't read up to this point in the book, I really didn't have a problem with that. I know that there is one thing um that they strayed with, or I guess they changed. But am I wrong? In the book, when Aemond essentially, breathes fire onto Aegon and his dragon, the name escapes me. What's Aegon's dragon's name?
Sunfire.
Sunfire, right? Yeah. Wasn't it done on purpose in the books?
So yes, and also if I'm remembering correctly, I literally read this a few days ago and I'm already sort of forgetting. But the way that the battle goes down is like the three of them, at least how I read it in the description, is that all three dragons go down in a mass together.
And
And
it doesn't play out like
Vagar,
that, essentially.
yeah, and Vagar is the only one who obviously is able to like come out like unscathed from that.
I guess
Um,
that makes sense because, him being the largest dragon, uh,
yeah, her.
it would, I think it's just more of a sense of power scaling. Why would the largest dragon go down with the other two dragons who, pretty much pale in comparison to him? And it also goes to show, this entire season, essentially, they've been building up, essentially hyping up, they're saying, Aemond and Vagar, that they're the most, lethal duo in the realm. So to have him go down within the first battle, not go down as in like, like in defeat, but like to have him go down with the other two dragons, I guess would have really, defeated the hype surrounding it. So I can understand why they did that. But during the episode, did you get a vibe that maybe Aemond was I don't want to say he was aiming for
Oh, he was definitely like,
Sunfire,
"Well, I mean, if this is the
but
way that it has to
yeah,
go."
like, oh God, I'm so sorry about this. That's
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
no,
that's the vibe that I got.
like them not going down at the same time because of like undermining their prowess, I don't think would necessarily work because they do still go down with melees for a moment. Like that's when Cole gets knocked out. It's
Hmm.
whenever like both Vagar and melees crash in, which they did. Hats off to all of the VFX people involved with this because it looked crazy.
It looked flawless.
Seeing dragons fight is wild. um, it was really epic to see, and I like how just not like dirty doesn't sound like the right word, but how like uh
Gritty.
just chaotic. Yeah, just how chaotic it is when dragons start fighting each other in midair because like then they're not like they're obviously trying to like stay flying, but because of the way they're fighting, they're just falling to the like I don't know. I just really liked how the fight
I just
choreography
thought like
between the dragons
when
played out. It felt real.
right when I was watching, I thought like it would be a little more graceful, if that makes sense. But at the same
Yeah,
time, Melee's and Sunfire. I don't think has Sunfire ever been in any battles. I don't think so, right?
Sunfire has not.
Okay, but Melee's and Vagar have.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like
Oh
they
yeah,
played that
Sunfire
very
got
well.
wrecked.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they played that well. It kind of really
Yeah.
showed the battle experience of the dragons compared to one another, and I really feel
Hmm.
like Vagar really shows his experience, with him not, falling out of the sky at one point, with Sunfire and Melee's. And then I really, really like the bond between Rhaenys and Melee's. I thought that was
Yeah.
great. When she was pretty
Oh, it
much
was done
saying,
so
we're
well.
going to battle again and all that stuff. I thought that was fantastic. It really shows the bond between, dragon and dragon rider. And that's not something you really have to emphasize on because this is a show about Targaryens and they're all pretty much essentially dragon riders. But at the same time, man, it really just shows you that the bond between a dragon rider or a Targaryen and their dragon is just it runs so deep, you know.
Yeah, it does. It was really good to see, and you see it also constantly like throughout the battle and how they do. I also the sound of dragons dying sucks, man.
It
I knew
does.
I knew it was gonna be rough, and then I was watching it happen, and I was like, "Oh man, why did I choose this as my fandom? Why did I do this to myself?"
It's yeah, yeah.
It's so hard.
They
It's
they
nothing
don't
but
they don't
tragedy. It only gets worse from here. Like
it
there's
does.
not.
It does. I like I said, I haven't
Uh,
read that far into the book, but I do know that there's tragedy after
it
tragedy
just gets
after tragedy. It
yeah.
just gets so much worse. And
Um.
weirdly enough, like I'm scared of it, but I'm excited. I'm excited to
Oh,
see how it
same.
plays out on screen. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
hate watching it, but at the same time, I'm gonna love watching it at the same time. You know what I mean? If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it's the biggest feeling because I'm like, oh, this is so good, but so bad. Um, yeah, dragons fighting dragons is cool. That whole battle, I liked just the perspective they kept with it and how it's like sort of kind of a normal battle at the beginning, and then dragons show up, and just completely all of that changes, and everything is about
I-
just the
That's nothing new
dragons.
to us, though. Like honestly, since Game of Thrones, we've pretty much had that.
Yeah.
With
Well, I mean, I
Daenerys'
think the
dragons.
dragons. Yeah, but I think hers are different because it's not like I mean, in the sense that everything changes as soon as a dragon shows up. Yeah, but in that one, it was only one offensive dragon. Like you don't have
I
the
guess that
two
makes sense.
sides
I
with it, and
guess
you're not
it
dealing
was
with actual
in
like.
more in Game of
dr-
Thrones. It kind of felt like when dragons showed up, it was like the nuclear option.
Yeah,
Everything went
which it's
nuclear.
still like is that here, except even worse, sort of, because now it's just everyone trying to like survive the fact that there's dragons fighting above. They literally in the behind the scenes thing, Ryan Condal kept on calling it Dragon War.
Hmm.
I was like, that's sick. That's a sick descriptor of what's happening. But it's
Dragon War
true. I
is
mean,
great.
yeah, like it's sort of the only thing that matters at that point. Like whichever dragon wins, like that's who wins.
Exactly.
Um,
I thought the
which is
episode
why.
itself was going to be called "The Battle of Rook's Nest," which would make sense. Technically, it
Yeah,
is the Battle of Rook's Nest. Um, but yeah, I don't get that trend. By the way, I don't get the. I don't. Why do we not get the episode titles?
we have it now. It's the red dragon and the gold.
Oh, is it?
It was up.
Okay.
Yeah, it was updated like an hour like after. They just for some reason they don't do them live, which I guess.
I never understood that. Never did. All right.
But
I mean, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Otherwise,
no,
is
it's.
there anything else that really stood out to you this episode?
I don't think so. I mean, the Damon thing is really cool. Him losing his. I think it's so funny that he's just doing that on his own while everyone else is fighting with
Yeah,
dragons.
honestly, like
Um,
he's gonna be so pissed he missed out on this.
yeah, I mean, I think that the little moments in the episode were all pretty, like, they were all good. I liked, like I said briefly earlier, how Rhaenyra's council was like handled and the stuff with Jason Bela and
Hmm.
all of that. Yeah, there's the sequence between Aegon and Alicent was a fantastic scene and did a lot for both of them. But yeah, I mean, it's that stuff, and then like we got dragons fighting for the first time, which is that's
Great. Oh my God, love
a
that.
big moment.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think those are the main things.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, overall, like a really good episode, and I love the fact that the Dragon War didn't really carry the episode. The episode itself had good moments on its own, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that was good, but when we come back, we're gonna discuss what's next for this season and what we're essentially gonna see going forward. So we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Alex. Enjoying the show on the Aspect Network? Then you should check out my show, Philosophy of X. Each week, I pair an X Men character, story, or concept with a relevant philosophical topic and explore how the two relate to one another. Join me on my journey to examine the world of X Men through philosophy. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to the Valyrian Voice. We've talked a lot about this episode so far, but we've now unfortunately reached the halfway point of season two. Alex, how do you think the show goes from here as we approach the mid-season finale?
Yeah, I mean, one, it's weird. I hadn't thought about it in having seen half of the episodes now, since it's an episode season, until I was reading our notes for this, and I was like, oh man, yeah, this is
Halfway. It's
yeah,
crazy.
it's the halfway point, which is a bummer. Yeah, I think I'm really curious where they're going to stop the season, like in the overall story. Um, I am mostly curious how things are going to go with Damon's situation by the end. Um, and to see where that kind of like lands and how quickly they go through some of the other points. But yeah, I mean, we have to get more dragons fighting dragons. Like I was just saying before the break, like it's just going to get worse as far as dragon war and lives lost. I think whenever Allison says it, and you highlighted earlier that like um, this war is going to be fought one way or another, and a lot of people are going to die, and it's going to be terrible. And so now we're really like in the thick of that proper. Like before this episode, we had all of the espionage stuff going on and trying to like win the war, gain an advantage without outright battle, and especially dragons getting involved. And we are now past that point. So I think now it's kind of going forward into a world for these characters where they are unleashing that kind of chaos and death on a regular basis and fighting each other in that way on top of everything else. Um, I do like the way that Rhaenyra put emphasis whenever she was telling Jace about the Song of Ice and Fire, which I am so conflicted about how I feel about them continuously name dropping that in the episode,
Hmm.
but or in episodes. But whenever she was mentioning that, and she was like, the horrors that I've just unleashed cannot be for like just the throne. And I like the way that she um, contextualizes the dragons going to war in that way, and the way that comes from it. So yeah, for the rest of the season, I mean, I think I'm going to be most curious overall how the pacing continues to go and like how these episodes are kind of structured as a whole.
Right.
Because I know like the some of the big strokes that they presumably will hit by the end of the end of the season. I'm really curious because I think that's the thing that's been the most um, not necessarily inconsistent, but the most interesting with this season so far. I thought it was done really well in the first two. Third one was kind of weirdish, and then I think this one picked it up more and come back
Right. Yeah.
more into like familiar feeling. But yes, I'll be really interested to see how that goes going forward.
No, I totally agree. The pacing more or less has been, somewhat consistent this season, but other than last episode, it's been great. As for how the rest of how the rest of the season's gonna go, I'm kind of with you on that, but at the same time, like, how are they gonna decide where to end season two? Like, at what critical point? Because I know that this show's slated to run for 4 seasons. Um, but at the same time, like, how, like, as a showrunner, where do you really, how can you decide where to end the season? You know?
Yeah, that's I'm so curious about what they're doing there, what they're gonna do there. We know they've already been greenlit for season three. They posted about that before the premiere even happened. So they obviously like have a plan. But yeah, I'm very curious to see where exactly things end up by the season finale.
I'm just excited, but at the same time, like, we really are in the thick of it. I feel like, 4 more episodes is more than enough to really, show us more and more of this, the war aspect. I thought that the timing, this being episode 4 of 8, for them to start, the more war and slash political aspect of it was a great decision. It doesn't feel rushed, and it doesn't feel like it was dragged out at all. Like I said, the only grip that I had with this season was the pacing of the last episode. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, yeah, I do think it'll just be so interesting to see the whole uh, country essentially like at war. Like there's literally a civil war happening, and so I'm very it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that and continue to display that. It's wild to think about the fact that it took a season and a half to get to the you know like start of Dragon War in the show about the Dragon War. Um, but I think it all makes sense, and I think that all the character building and exploration they did in that definitely like pays off for all of the huge climactic crazy things that we're going to see now going forward. Um, but yeah, I'm excited, terrified, also. But I can't believe we're also just halfway through the season already. That's so sad. I remember we were at
It
the
ju- it
beginning of the
feels-
season.
it feels like it's been only, like, 2 episodes. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
feels
We
like
only
it hasn't been that long. The fact that we've been, at this for a month now is just, something just doesn't feel real. You know,
it's wild. Time isn't real.
it is.
Um,
It's a social construct.
yeah, but so I think those are most of our thoughts. Unless you had more you wanted to add about where we could potentially go for the rest of the season.
I honestly, I can't really predict. I don't have any specific thoughts on where I think it's gonna go. I could talk about, where I'd like it to go, but at the same time, the writing this season has been fantastic. So, like, even no matter how or what's on my wish list, I kind of feel like I have trust in the show going forward. You know?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I'm glad I had forgotten this point. I'm so glad I remembered it. I really, really love the visual language that they've established in this season, especially in comparison to the first one. I did really like the way the first season looked still, but I like the frame being bigger in this season, but then also just the way they've used the camera, I think has been really, really nice this season. I love all the super, uh, the way the focus is and the depth of field and a lot of these shots is super like blown out on the edges, and it creates a really striking image. And they've been using that a lot,
Hmm.
as well as just like generally nice looking shots. It's looked good. I'm a fan of good cinematography, and I think that what they've established for how this season looks and feels and kind of operates has been really great. It's very much
It does feel like
impressed
an
me.
upgrade. It does feel like an upgrade. Even starting from the first episode, there were a couple shots that you and I both talked about, where
Yeah.
we really
I
liked.
mean,
But
dude, even
yeah,
that first shot in the forest, like that tracking shot that is just in
so
the
good.
trees and then finds the
Exactly.
raven going through it,
So
like,
good.
it was fantastic.
No, no, they're
So
really
yeah,
they're really doing a really good job with cinematography this season. I definitely
yeah.
agree.
So that's been nice. I also loved, this is just a random point. I loved it's going into the magical stuff, but the cut of whenever Damon is drinking and then he's just like 12 hours later or something, presumably, and he has like
It's
no
crazy.
recollection of like
And
getting there. So good. Such a good edit. Like, oh, it was great.
or him summoning that one guy, and not knowing,
Yeah.
not
Just like
he's
forgetting.
just like there, and then he's like, okay, what do you want? He's like, well, you're the one that summoned me.
Yeah. Good stuff. Um, But yeah, I think that'll just about wrap it up for our thoughts on this episode. So thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 4 of the Valyrian Voice. Ahmed, where can people find you online?
You guys can find me online at Hamtastic, two C's at the end, on Twitter and Instagram.
Very nice, very nice. And you can find me online at AP Batman with two T's. Please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts can be found. You can also follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Thank you to Peter Fraser for providing our series music. And again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you beyond the wall.